casting a translucent FP40 polyurethane skin backed up with low-density flexible foam. In this tutorial, I'm going to show the process of casting up a prop head using a skin of translucent polyurethane, pigmented to look just like skin, and then of course backed with flexible foam. Now, FP40 is a flexible polyurethane rubber that cures to around an A40, and I'll be casting that, or sloshing that rather, into a flexible mold made with TC5130F platinum silicone. And then at the end of the video, I'll be doing a quick paint job over the finished prop head. Now, first off, we've got the mold that we're going to be working with. This is the TC5130F platinum silicone brushed on mold that I made in a previous tutorial, and I'll link that on the end screen, so be sure to check that out if you're unfamiliar with that process. That's a good breakdown just of the basic brush on mold process. Now, I came up with this idea for using a polyurethane skin material because I had poured up a few casts in a previous video with no pigment in the FP40, and I was pleasantly surprised with the color stability and the UV stability on that FP40. It actually came out really well, and several months later, it still looked really nice and translucent. And I thought that might actually make a really nice skin material for large body props and that sort of thing. And there's certain applications where a polyurethane skin is preferable to silicone. Now, to begin, we're going to dispense our part B first into the mixing cup. And remember, FP40 is a fast-setting polyurethane rubber that mixes 2B to 1 part A. And I'm mixing up the color into the part B first because that is less moisture sensitive. So I can get my color just right and then add the part A to activate it. Now, I added some white dye to this. This is a 74 series white dye, and then I'm adding some flocking colors to this. And I'm doing this exactly the way that I would typically color a translucent silicone. And typically when I'm doing fair skins, I start with a little bit of the white pigment, or in this case, a white dye. And then I add the flocking colors to give that more life, and especially that capillary color really gives a lot of realism to it. So the same flocking colors that you would use with silicone are the same ones I'm using here. The only difference is I'm using white polyurethane dye instead of white silicone pigment. Now, once I've added the part A, remember the clock starts ticking as soon as that part A is mixed in. So we want to get everything mixed up thoroughly and accurately, and then get that poured into my silicone mold. Now, this is where it's really helpful to set your smartphone timer for about 4 to 5 minutes, or basically the working time of the material, and then just keep the mold moving and sloshing it until the material gels. So we only have to keep this moving around for about 4 to 5 minutes. And if I was to do this over again, I would probably do a couple of different sloshes of skin material. This one came out a little bit on the thin side. Now, once that skin gels, once it's cured to where the foam won't distort that skin, so typically about 25 minutes or so after I cast that skin, I'm ready to pour my foam behind it. Now, for the flexible foam core behind the skin, I'm using TC266 flexible foam, and that is a variable density foam that can be mixed to several different densities, but here I'm going to be using 2B to 1A ratio, which results in a 3-pound density, very soft flexible foam. Now, flexible foam kicks off pretty fast, so you want to get that mixed up accurately and thoroughly and pour that into the mold as soon as possible. And that's one of the reasons why I added that flesh tone pigment to the part B before adding the part A, to give myself as much time as possible to get that accurately mixed and put into the mold. And now ready to step back and allow the foam to do its thing. And typically a foam head like this, you could demold about an hour or so after casting. So once our skin is completely cured and our foam is completely cured and nice and squishy, we are ready to demold our head. So all in all, this whole process took about an hour and a half to slosh that skin, pour the foam, and then let everything cure up to a point where it had handling strength, and then demold it. And one important point about polyurethanes, and especially polyurethane foams, is warm temperature gets you the best results when you're working with foam. So ideally you want to work in a warm environment, at least 75 degrees, to get the best results. And also to make sure you get a good bond between your flexible foam and that polyurethane skin, you want to do that as soon as possible. And now I'm going to do a quick paint job over that cast head. Now, there are a number of different paint systems that can be used to paint flexible polyurethane elastomers and polyurethane foams. There's both solvent-based as well as water-based. So I'll put links to a few of those options in the video description. But here I'm using a solvent-based system, but whatever system you use, it's really important. Follow the manufacturer's directions. Make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area and wear a respirator, especially if you're going to be airbrushing. Anytime you're using an airbrush with a solvent or even a water-based system, it's important to protect your lungs. Now, one of the things I always like to do when I'm airbrushing is I keep a piece of poster board or foam core handy just to test that spray pattern and test the intensity of the color before I spray that on my actual piece, because there's no going back once you start spraying your piece. And you saw me testing some paint there on that little ear piece earlier, and that's one of those little details that's real important when you're doing this kind of work. Always save your little reject casts, and that way you can use those for paint tests and make sure you get good adhesion, make sure you get your color right before you start painting a critical piece. Now, the main reason I wanted to do this head was to see how this would work as a translucent polyurethane skin and just see how this would take paint and see if this was a viable alternative to silicone, because there are some applications for medical simulators and some effects prop applications where a polyurethane skin is preferable to a silicone skin, because there are going to be times where you need things to stick to a skin where silicone is probably not going to be the best material for that. Now, once I get this all painted, I just put some baby powder on it to mat it down. And overall, this was just kind of a proof of concept just to see how FP40 would work as a translucent skin material and see how well it would paint and see if I could handle it much the way I would typically use a silicone skin material. And overall, I think I got some pretty good results. And if there's interest in it, I might do a more involved painting tutorial and a more involved casting tutorial with this process on a future video. Now, as usual, I'll put all of the links to the products I used in the video description, so be sure to check those out. And check the end screen. I'll link to the original mold where I molded this head using the TC5130F Platinum Silicone. Thanks for watching, and of course, if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, because hey, who doesn't want to learn how to make a translucent polyurethane skin over a flexible foam head?